Greetings, everybody. It's March 2nd, Sunday. This is when I promise to upload this video and publish it. I'm filming a little bit early, as you can see, probably earlier in the night. But the reason why I'm filming this early so that I can post this at later on in the day when I have other things that I'm going to do. I'm going to do a scheduled post, but I feel the need to film right now in order to try to maintain some semblance of a schedule, because we need consistency from our leadership, and that's what I want, and so that's what I need to be for y'all. So before I get to reading my paper, this will be part 2, chapter 2 of my paper, and I'm just going to go through I'm going to go through about half of this second chapter. I'm going to go through about half of it in one case study. But before I get to that, I am just going to clear up a little bit of confusion about what I have been saying. I'm not saying that it is right to be willing to fight something only when you think that you're going to win. And none of us in the know believed that we were going to win, that we were going to prevail after the 2024 election. We just did not believe that. But we found our reasons why to hold on to the small chance that we could, and that chance has grown and ebbed and flowed over time. I'm not saying that it is right, or that I'm not necessarily saying that it's accurate to believe that the odds are in our favor. I don't necessarily think they are always. Maybe now a little better than average, but there's a lot of ways that this could go wrong. I don't think the odds are in our favor, but for the purposes of morale, we should try to focus on the other side of it as much as we can, of the idea that we could win, and what are we going to do if we are able to make it. We should focus on that, because the weaker among us will show up for victory. They won't show up for defeat. They won't show up for being right and not being. They won't show up for being right and not winning. And there are a lot of people like that. And on my worst days, I can be like that. And if we're not able to make use of those people and to work with them and help them grow and build them up, then we are doomed as a country. And so that is just a little bit of confusion that I wanted to clear up. And we should do that because it's better than giving up. We should focus on our ability to win. I've seen I saw this Vouch video, and he's been making content like this for a while, and he was all about, he's been for the past several months, he got demoralized very early, which was surprising because he was warning everybody else about this, but he got demoralized very early, and he made he makes all kinds of videos and titles, and they're demoralizing in that way of, oh, we don't have the ability to do this. We don't have the courage to do this. Maybe we don't, but, you're going to make that more likely by saying it. And so I focus on the idea that we could have the courage, and that if this moves slow enough, we might be able to defeat it anyway, even though that we're weak. I'm under no illusions about our strength as the working people of the USA. I'm under no delusions about that, but I still think that we could win. And I think that if we give up on that, then it stops being a possibility, and I don't want to do that. So that's my preamble. I'm going to write down the timestamp so that you can all go to the spot in the video where I'm going to start with my reading of my paper, and see you then. Chapter 2. MCM, Mass Child Maltreatment, this is the acronym I'll use for the rest of the paper, as a human tragedy. Theories and definition. According to cited material on Wikipedia, adverse childhood experiences include childhood emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, household dysfunction during childhood. The categories are verbal abuse, physical abuse, contact sexual abuse, a battered mother or father, household substance abuse, household mental illness, incarcerated household members, and parental separation or divorce. The experiences chosen were based upon prior research that has shown them to have significant negative health or social implications. Research shows that exposure to abuse and to serious forms of family dysfunction in the childhood family environment are likely to activate the stress response, thus potentially disrupting the developing nervous, immune, and metabolic systems of children. There are a wide variety of online specialists in the topic, and they each have their own theory of what the most damaging aspect of neglect, abuse, or abandonment is. Anna Runkle, for instance, believes that the most serious damage is neurological dysregulation, while Tim Fletcher believes it is shame, and Daniel Mackler believes it is the habits of denial that we see. As an aside, while I, the author, can see the validity of all of these ideas, I personally believe that the most dangerous aspect of childhood trauma is the internalization of unwanted antisocial values that break the foundation of healthy morality. In any case, according to Ruth Benedict's definition of shame, it is a fusion of guilt and fear. This definition represents a profound breakdown of the idea of justice, in which those who morally come up short graciously accept the consequences of their actions, while those who are unjustly persecuted continue their struggle boldly. Hear what I said in the introductory statement if you listen to it? It's all connected. This stuff is all connected. The development of this form of shame is a danger to society for obvious reasons, like what I just described. Statistics. Ultimately, the scientific consensus is well established. People who endure abuse, neglect, or other man-made trauma are often several dozen times more likely to abuse drugs, eat unhealthily, drive recklessly, commit violent crime, and earn less. They are less likely to work fulfilling and meaningful jobs, as will be described below in part 3. It says chapter 4. I might have to change that. The part that describes the social effects, which would be the next one. Anyway, chapter 3. They are also more likely to have unwanted children themselves, and therefore to pass these effects on to their own children. The generational effects can persist even when basic conditions of safety, such as monogamy and financial safety, are present in their households. Counterintuitively, it is not uncommon for the children of divorce, second generation, to have antagonistic marriages, which may present more danger to the children than the original, to the children which are the grandchildren, than the original divorce or promiscuity. The third generation. In the case study provided below, which chronicles the generations of a Holocaust survivor's family, we see that even in this context, which was deeply tragic from the beginning, the family lineages which do better are the ones who are more able to follow the norms of monogamy. Like several of the other case studies, which are rarely simple stories of a lost greatness or mythic past, there's a reason why these case studies became known to psychologists in the first place. We can still see the progress that was lost in these cases due to the lack of monogamous norms. So I'm going to be paraphrasing this case study because it's like double the length of what I've already read. So Jakob is Holocaust survivor and the first generation American. He came in 1949 from Poland. He wanted to start a new life, but he has all of this trauma inside of him that they don't really know about very much, because we don't have the research back then. To a degree, we didn't need it, because we weren't dealing with MCM, mass child maltreatment, back then. It's still, I'm much gladder that we live in a world where we have this research and therapy than without it. It'll all be worth it as long as we survive. By the way, hold that if you don't remember anything else. It will all be worth it if we survive. So keep on fighting. Anyway, unfortunately, he lives in a time when mental health is not understood. Yeah, that's what I just said. He gets married in 1960, has his first child, William, and then marry as well 2 years later. In secret, he can't escape any of this. He feels all this survivor's guilt because his family got killed. Shame on the Nazis, by the way, and shame on anybody that's trying to replicate them now, which there are a lot. He turns to alcohol to quiet the guilt, and he gets angry and violent around the kids and his wife. The family develops negative routines, so William, the boy, and the older one, starts fights, whereas Mary gets an anxiety disorder and becomes perfectionistic. So William goes along. Now we're going to the second generation. William goes along. He gets incarcerated for domestic violence. We don't hear anything in this case study about the mother of William's child, who is around this same time. The person that is obviously the victim of the domestic violence, most likely. We don't hear anything about them. It is pretty likely, based on context clues, that this was a short-term relationship with not a lot of commitment. So, but in any case, again, I believe that that's what this is, and it's a good example. If it is, we see this a lot. Uh, when he gets out, he is still addicted, and he has the stigma of being a felon. He's unemployable. This is why, unfortunately, there's one felon that isn't unemployable, and he's currently impersonating the President of the United States. But that's a different issue. William doesn't get on his feet. He lives out his days in homeless shelters, occasionally trying and failing at rehab, and he ends up in a retirement community for people that are mentally ill. And he doesn't make it to his 70th birthday. Mary does better on the surface, and she really does in a lot of ways. Most of her children, most of her descendants, lived better lives than the descendants of William. So, and this is the point that I'm making. Mary was shielded from her father's physical violence and has a bunch of survivor's guilt, just like Jacob. She's a perfectionist. She enables William's bad behavior. She has a loving husband and several children within a couple of years around the same time as not Jacob, as William's arrest. She can't settle down. She can't have peace. And she doesn't believe in divorce, and so she doesn't get a divorce. And in a way that's good, but the fact that she was considering that is a warning sign, and she should have been willing to put in the work to try to help make things better. But I disagree with the person that wrote this case study, which I have posted verbatim here. I disagree with them. I think that it was the better of two horrible choices. It was a better choice for her to stay in an unhappy marriage with a man that is a good man, but it's unhappy because of her own psychological problems, than to leave. As I have, and I'm going to give you another couple doses of evidence for why I believe that. But yeah, I believe that it was the better of two sucky choices, which is what they were. It's like Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. Obviously, getting therapy would be the best choice, and listening to the part of yourself that wants to get a divorce while telling it no. That's obviously the best policy. Unless, if there's a real problem, obviously, that's different. But this was not. There was no cheating going on. There was no domestic violence. This was perfectly salvageable. And I'm glad that she believed that too. Anyway, so Jacob's grandkids. William's child is called Theo, and Theo was abandoned. He ended up in foster care. This is another one of the reasons why I believe that William's partner and Theo's mother was in friends with benefits or some kind of casual situationship with William. They were certainly not married, because we would have heard of it if they were. One of the reasons why I believe that that is the case is because, like, the father goes to jail, the kid ends up in foster care. Where's the mother? So there's several indications of that. Anyway, Theo bounces around from home to home. This is as bad a story as the one that I've had. Uh, he lives with his paternal grandparents sometimes, which is better than nothing. They should have kept him in general. He has a bunch of behavioral issues and feels unwanted, which makes sense. People try to help him, but the chaos makes it impossible for him to grow. I can vouch for this, by the way. I haven't really grown all that much psychologically since the 2024 election. And I had a lot of peace for a long time. And this one thing, which is an extremely disruptive thing to my environment, but it's only one of them, not over and over and over again, knocked me off track. But anyway, he can't really make any meaningful change until his 20s because the old life just constantly is reeling him back in. And so he suffers. And I would say that he suffers more than the kids that I'm about to talk about next. And the reason for that suffering is the non-monogamy. The reason for this differential that we're seeing is the non-monogamy. He could have had a life just as good as this other person's life if they had been monogamous, or nearly as good if they had been monogamous, if the mother had stayed with the child, and if the mother had committed to trying to fix the relationship or leave with the child. But instead there was all this abandonment because he chose a partner that didn't know how to commit. Anyway, now that's my interpretation. There's no evidence directly that there was non-monogamy, but it just doesn't seem like there was. So, on the opposite side, married children have all this structure. They feel smothered, controlled, and never good enough. I'd rather err in that direction, frankly. I was a child that, relatively speaking, had honor. I don't believe that good people, I don't really believe that people deserve stuff in general. I don't have that word as part of my vocabulary very much. But I still, I had a relative sense of honor, and I did feel for a long time like I was terrified of the idea of unconditional love because I did not trust that I would be able to behave well. I legitimately thought, and this probably wasn't true, at least from my mother. I do have parents that are well-intentioned. They're fuck-ups, but they're well-intentioned. I'll give my own case study later on, and I might clip that out as well. But I legitimately felt like for basically my whole childhood that if I wasn't somebody that was honorable and that followed most of the rules and tried to be a good citizen, if I was not any of those things, I legitimately thought that I would not be loved if I wasn't those things. But, in my experience, yeah, I would rather have too much structure than too little. It's preferable, in my opinion. But anyway, Mary had a better relationship with her father, and so her kids constantly heard the stories of the past as well. Again, if you process it well enough, it's good to teach your kids the lessons of history. I'd rather err on that side than err on the side of not knowing anything. I think it would have been very helpful to me to have school, and to a lot of people, to have school teach them about how kids get abused in the United States and have been for quite a while. in the name of all sorts of sexual reasons. I think that that would be good if schools taught that. But yeah, this was unprocessed trauma that they were being exposed to, so that can be forcing your children to be therapists is not good for their mental health. So Elsa becomes like her mother, perfectionist, graduates the top of her class, and marries somebody that's safe, which will which means that she'll be able to get therapy, and blah blah blah, on and on. All sorts of, it makes it so much easier for her to get better. I feel like I'm repeating myself. High strung, has a bunch of OCD, and feels all worthless. I don't know, maybe this was me as a child. Again, what I described, I thought that that if I wasn't an honorable person. And I'm going to give you a personal experience. I might include this in my own bio later on. Maybe not. I lied to my mother about one of the times that I treated a kid badly. I felt very guilty about the way that I treated him, and I wanted to be better than that. But I didn't talk to her about it because I felt like she had enough to deal with. She didn't need to watch her legend and leader crumble and have a scandal. That's the way I'm describing it now. I didn't have the language then. It's incredible. I was acting like I was the president or something. Like I was some... But I was 9. And this was my mother. But anyway. Yeah, it's crazy. So maybe I'm this person. I've been getting better. Part of what's healed me is just knowing that, yeah, you will never... You're good enough. Nothing will... Nobody deserves anything. It's all a big sham. But that doesn't mean that we have to settle for what we deserve. We can still ask for better. And it's our birthright. Which is the Christian message, by the way. This is the Christian message, and it has helped me quite a lot once I opened up to it. Which took me a long time, because I felt like the deserving thing was in there for so long. Unconditional love was hard. It was scary. I feel like I'm making you into my own personal therapist. I gotta get back on the path. Eva rebels violently. She's an artist, but she has a mood disorder, and she got addicted to stuff, and is diagnosed with borderline personality. She can't really have a job, and eventually goes on SSDI. But one of the things, I'm sure that she got a lot of help from her parents when she was trying to get better, because they were a source of stability. The people on the other side of the family don't get to have that, because their parents are all... They don't have any they're not a source of stability. And that's the damage that happens when people act this way. So, you have generational trauma. There's hope. But sometimes, just like what we're living through now, things have to get worse before they get better. So, you have, and that's what we're seeing now, cultural shocks. So Theo, he's 20 years old, This little kid that was all abandoned and felt worthless and was in the foster system. Likely a bastard child to both his father and later on his mother. Uh, that's an old word. He's certainly a bastard child. He was born into a fragile family, is a better way of putting it. But he likely barely even knows either of them. He gets out of addiction. He has children with his possibly wife, but maybe not. It's a very weird situation. I don't know all that much about this person. It seems like it was a little topsy-turvy and fragile, because what happened next is the 2008 crash, which rocked my family as well as his, and made it obvious that that it wasn't healthy, because it was able to prop itself up with all this cheap credit. But in 2008, all of this stuff, the economy crashes because the housing bubble pops. Theo and his wife lose their jobs and their savings, and this makes them, it doesn't bring out the best in them, it brings out the worst in them. Theo seems like he's more of a problem here. He can't connect with his wife. He can't really connect at all. And this kind of happened with me. It was very difficult for me to pay attention to my kids after the 2024 election. Now, that's much bigger than the economy. It's an authoritarian regime that could do all kinds of things. It's a sworn enemy of my life now that I'm on YouTube. But it's still same idea. My kids have not hardly seen me at all. They've only seen me once since Inauguration Day. I'm gonna try to get back to seeing them, to be, if nothing else, to be a good example to all of you, because I want you to be good parents. You need to learn from the mistakes of the past. At some point, Theo's wife can't handle it and takes the kids and leaves. Theo battles with depression, homelessness, relapses into addiction, and commits suicide. Whatever. I can't take it back at this point. Maybe it'll be age gated or demonetized. I don't know. There goes anything. I don't monetize my videos yet. But yeah. So the relationship broke up, which was bad for them. But he was clearly the problem here. But this is a second example of it. And he died, which is even worse. He was abandoned. They felt like he abandoned them. He was abusive to them. But then they missed him, and then he died. And that was a horrible cocktail of emotions that came along with that. That I love those kids because of what they could do. Anyway, Leonore. So Leonore, which is the little sister and son of Theo, becomes a nun and is able to rebuild a life. And what do you know? They're able to do it through the church, and specifically through a celibate organization, which is certainly a poetic detail here. But it could be, like, she could be happily married, and it would be the same thing. They're able, by leaving behind this arcade of negative freedom, they're able to do very well for themselves. Theo starts his own foster family, and they end up with a happy life because they treated their kids well. They learned. So this is a surprisingly good example. And sometimes, like, I believe what we've seen from the black community, even, which experienced this problem a little bit earlier than the rest of the country, they have been getting better for like the past 10 years, 15 years, ever since the recession. I really do believe that if you're able, if a country or people is able to be propped up through this long enough, that they can recover. I really do think it can happen. But that requires miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. But anyway, back to the topic. Elsa's daughter, Jane, stable, loving household, gets into high school around 2012, but it seemingly looks good on paper. But she is self-harming and numb, and it baffles the people because Jane, is it Jane? Yeah, Elsa's daughter. This is on that side of the family. And Jane baffles Elsa because nothing really bad has happened. They've followed all of the rules. They got all of this therapy, but then the counselor asks Elsa to do the family history. And all of this modeled and learned behavior becomes obvious. And Jane is able to manage things with medication and therapy. Again, she could have gone completely down the tubes and lost everything, but since she had this reserve of stability, it turned out better. Jane's cousin, Thomas, similar boat, depression and anxiety. His parents got divorced during his childhood, and he ended up living with his mother. So Eva struggles to control her borderline personality disorder. And so there's no stability. There's no stability in general. There's no stability of the family. There's no stability of the people there. Thomas feels abandoned, and he's suicidal, often hospitalized. And it seems like he loses what he has. I don't know how much he lost, but he did eventually get to a rock bottom in his early adulthood. All of this time got taken, and he is able to recover and become an HVAC repair technician and be a leader on YouTube. But it was so much harder and took so much longer for him because he didn't have that reserve of stability in his life. Kind of the argument that I'm going for in this paper is that the sexual revolution, in a way, it was a cultural shock. It was, I'm comparing it to, at least in the effect that it had on the children and on generational trauma, to what happened in 2008. But it was so much longer, it was so much more persistent, and it was so extreme, and it was so widespread across pretty much all demographics. it's utterly unprecedented in the history of this country, or for a really long time in the English-speaking world at all. It's useful to understand that while monogamy was adhered to in the circumstances where there's generational trauma at play, so this is going all the way back to the beginning, when there's generational trauma at play, and there was non-monogamy in the past or some other generational trauma, the legacy that is left by that is still present, and therefore I'm going to explain in part 5 that we have to heal the damage that's already been done. We can't simply ask for it to heal itself. We have to work towards that. So, and that's where I'm going to stop. I'm going to pick up with chapter 3 again next, chapter 2 I believe this is. I'm going to pick up with chapter 2 again next week, and God bless you all. Take care, and I will see you for a fireside chat next week. Bye.